For any area that you're tiling, you can really get creative. That's because tile comes in every imaginable color, texture, and size. We've picked out a really interesting pattern for the kitchen. This is a mosaic tile border we're starting with. Look at all the different textures and sizes in this border. Now, you may be thinking, that's a lot of cuts just to make this particular pattern, but it isn't. The manufacturer has made it easy for us by placing this mat on the back to hold these together. This is great for the do-it-yourselfer because you can pick out the pattern that you want and they're already together. This is going to make your project go a lot faster. Before you get started, prepare the area. Make sure that it's clean. This is a laminate surface that we're tiling over, so we need to sand this to rough it up so that the adhesive will bond to this surface better. This will keep our tiles securely in place. I'm removing all of the cover plates along the backsplash, but before you do this, make sure that you turn the power off to these outlets. The correct way to lay tile is to find the center point of the area that you're tiling. I've got 121.5, so that puts it at 60 3/4. Which is directly behind the sink. Now the reason for the center point, when you lay your tile, you work off of the center point going both ways. When you get to the end and you have to make cuts on your tile, both ends will look the same for a uniform look. Before you put the adhesive on the wall and start laying the tiles, it's important to do a dry fit. Leave enough space in between each one for a grout line. Now this is why it's important for the dry fit. You can see that if I leave it just like this, we have to make a very small cut on our mosaic border, and that's not going to look very good. Instead, with the dry fit, you can make adjustments. If I move this down about 1/4 of an inch, then it's flush with my backsplash. I can move the other ones down, and that 1/4 of an inch isn't going to make a difference in the overall look. Now, instead of using a saw to cut this off, I'm using a utility knife. Just cut the mat. Put it right back up there. And now we're ready for our installation. Now I'm ready to apply the adhesive. I'm using a notched trowel to apply this. Start with a nice sized dollop on your trowel and then start spreading this on. Now what's important to remember about the adhesive is you have to work quickly. You really only have about 30 minutes before this dries completely. So if you'll work in a small area at a time, you won't get in a bind. When you're applying the adhesive, make sure that you don't leave any holes such as this one. You need good coverage for your tiles to stick. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now all I have to do is find my center mark for my first piece. Work this in so that it has a nice bond. You need to use spacers in between each tile. These spacers come in different sizes depending on how thick or how thin you want your grout line. And after this dries, we'll take the spacers out. All right, this is my last border piece for this row. Let me get my spacer in place. And you can see that we've left enough space to have a good grout line on the end. We're going to come back and put end caps here later. One of the problems that you're going to run into is making your tile fit around the outlets. I've already cut this one, and you don't have to worry about your cut looking perfect because the switch cover is going to cover that. Let me show you how to measure so you can make that cut. Start at your grout line and measure over to the first opening of the outlet, which is 3.5. Then over to the second one is 5 3/4. Mark that on your tile, 3.5, 5 3/4. Now measure up to the top of the opening, which is 3 1/4. Again, mark that on the tile. Now we can go cut this out. I'm using a wet saw to make this cut. You can rent this tool for about $25 a day. This has a carbide tipped blade on it, and the water from the reservoir comes up over the blade, which cuts down on the amount of dust as you're cutting the tile. All you have to do is line this up with the blade and then make the cut. Once you've made the first 2 cuts, you still need to finish the opening. You do that by making multiple cuts all the way down to your mark so that you can loosen the tile to break that off and create your opening. See, that does a nice job, but it still has a few rough edges. Take some tile nippers just to cut that off. Now let's go see if it fits. I'm going to do another dry fit around this outlet just to make sure the opening is big enough. And that looks fine. It's okay to butter the back of the tile because it's easier to put the adhesive here than it would be to try to apply it around that outlet. Okay, let me just grab a couple of spacers. There. All right, that's my last piece of tile. As you can see, we've installed about 10 feet of tile for our backsplash. So now let's finish this end. This piece is called a bull-nosed end cap. Bull-nosed simply means that it has a rounded edge on one side as opposed to the other side that is straight. When you put this on, you have a nice finished edge and you still have room for a grout line. All you have to do with this is just apply your adhesive to the back and then put this in place. Now we're going to let this dry for 24 hours and then we'll come back tomorrow and grout all of this in. Our adhesive is dried overnight and now the tiles are all securely in place so we can grout this in. I'm using a tool which is a rubber float, and I've already mixed up a gray colored grout, but you can get grout in any color to match your pattern. You want to mix this the consistency of toothpaste. Take your float and then start smearing this on your tiles and make sure that you force it into all of the cracks. You need to work in a small area at a time, so have a bucket of water and a sponge right beside you. You want to wipe this down as you go because you want it to still be wet on your tiles. The drier it gets, the harder it's going to be to clean up. Also, make sure that you wipe this at a 45-degree angle over the joint so that you're not actually taking it out of the joint, you're mostly taking it off of the tile. You can tile a backsplash in a couple of days, but that's only because you need to allow for the drying time of the adhesive. We spent $200, but tiles range in price from 60 cents a piece up to $60 a piece. But the end result is you can give an old kitchen a brand new look.